Money doesn't care how hard you work. It never has. Every morning, millions of people wake up before sunrise. They work overtime, skip vacations, sacrifice weekends, and tell themselves the same comforting lie. If I keep working hard, one day I'll finally become wealthy. But if hard work were enough, construction workers would be billionaires. Farmers would own private jets. The people cleaning office buildings late into the night would be among the richest on earth. Yet, that's not the world we live in. Some people seem to attract money almost effortlessly, while others spend decades chasing it without ever catching up. So what's the difference? Most people think it's intelligence. Others blame luck, connections, or the family you were born into. Those things can matter, but they aren't the real reason. For centuries, one uncomfortable idea has quietly shaped politics, business, and human nature. It explains why some people rebuild fortunes even after losing everything, while millions of others spend their entire lives running on a treadmill that never leads to wealth. The brutal truth is this: money follows rules, and almost nobody teaches you what those rules are. Today, we're going to uncover them. Chapter 1. The lie everyone believes. Most people are not poor because they're lazy. In fact, many of the hardest working people you'll ever meet never become wealthy. They wake up before sunrise, commute for hours, work through exhaustion, and return home with just enough energy to prepare for the next day. They repeat this cycle for years, sometimes decades, believing that every extra hour they sacrifice brings them one step closer to financial freedom. It's a belief so deeply rooted that almost nobody stops to question it. From childhood, we're taught a simple formula: study hard, get good grades, find a secure job, work faithfully, stay loyal, and eventually, success will find you. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. After all, hard work is valuable. Discipline matters. Responsibility matters. But here's the question almost nobody dares to ask. If this formula truly created wealth, why are millions of hardworking people still struggling to pay their bills? Why do some people spend 40 years working without ever experiencing financial freedom, while others build extraordinary wealth in a fraction of that time? The answer isn't that one group works harder than the other. It's that they're playing completely different games. Most people spend their lives chasing income. The wealthy spend their lives building wealth. Those two things sound similar, but they're worlds apart. Income depends on your ability to keep working. Wealth grows because you've built or own something that continues creating value beyond your daily effort. History reveals this pattern again and again. Across civilizations, countless people worked tirelessly to keep societies running. Farmers cultivated the land, craftsmen built thriving industries, laborers carried entire economies on their backs. Their work was essential, but the greatest fortunes were often built by those who owned the land, controlled trade, invested in growing enterprises, or created systems that continued producing value long after the day's work had ended. The lesson isn't that hard work is meaningless. It's that hard work, by itself, has rarely been enough. The world doesn't simply reward effort. It rewards value. It rewards ownership. It rewards leverage. And until you understand that difference, money will always feel like something you're chasing, instead of something you're attracting. So, if effort alone isn't what creates wealth, what does money actually reward? That's the question we're about to answer. Chapter 2. Money doesn't reward effort. It rewards leverage. Money has no conscience. It doesn't reward sacrifice. It doesn't reward loyalty. And it certainly doesn't reward exhaustion. That may sound cold, but money isn't a person. It doesn't feel sympathy when you stay late at the office. It doesn't care that you've worked every weekend for the past 5 years. It follows patterns, not emotions. For most of our lives, we're taught to increase one thing: effort. Work longer. Work harder. Take on more responsibilities. Push yourself further than everyone else. But there's a problem. Effort has a limit. There are only 24 hours in a day. No matter how disciplined you become, You cannot work 40 hours in a single day. Your time is finite. Your energy is finite. Your life is finite. The people who build extraordinary wealth eventually realize something that changes the way they see the world. They stop asking, how can I work harder? Instead, they ask, how can 1 hour of my effort create 100 hours of value? That is leverage. Imagine two people. The first spends the entire day digging holes with a shovel. Every hole depends on another swing of the shovel. The moment that person stops working, the progress stops too. The second person spends months designing a machine that can dig thousands of holes with very little human effort. The work is difficult. It requires patience, creativity, and persistence. But once the machine exists, its impact is multiplied far beyond what one person could accomplish alone. Neither person is lazy. Neither person lacks discipline. The difference is that one person's effort is multiplied. That is the power of leverage. History is filled with people who understood this long before the word became popular. Merchants built trade networks that moved goods across continents. Inventors created tools that allowed one worker to do the work of hundreds. Business owners built organizations that continued serving customers even while they slept. They weren't rewarded simply because they worked harder. They were rewarded because they created systems that produced value at a scale individual effort never could. The same principle exists today. A book can be written once and read by millions. A software product can be developed once and used around the world. A single video can continue educating, entertaining, or inspiring people years after it was first published. Technology has made leverage more accessible than at any other point in history, but the principle itself has never changed. Decades ago, Niccolo Machiavelli observed that lasting power rarely belonged to the person who worked the hardest. It belonged to the person who understood how systems worked and positioned themselves wisely within them. Wealth follows a remarkably similar pattern. Those who build, own, or influence valuable systems often create opportunities that continue producing results long after the initial work is done. So ask yourself one question. Is everything you build dependent on your time? Or are you creating something that can continue generating value even when you're no longer actively working? The answer to that question may reveal why some people spend their entire lives chasing money, while others build something that allows money to keep finding them. But if leverage is so powerful, why do so few people ever build it? The answer has less to do with money than most people imagine. It begins in the mind. Chapter 3. The wealth principle nobody sees. Most people spend their lives asking the wrong question. They wake up every morning wondering, how can I make more money? It's an understandable question, but it's also the reason so many people remain trapped in the same financial cycle year after year. The people who build lasting wealth tend to ask a completely different question. They ask, how can I become so valuable that people willingly pay for what I can offer? That small shift changes everything. Money is nothing more than an exchange. Every time someone spends it, they're making a decision. They're saying, what I'm receiving is worth more to me than what I'm giving away. Think about it. Nobody pays a doctor because they enjoy spending money. They pay because they value their health. Nobody hires an engineer simply because they need another employee. They hire someone who can solve a problem they cannot solve themselves. Nobody buys a book because paper and ink are expensive. They buy ideas that they believe can improve their lives. In every case, money follows value. The greater the value people perceive, the more willingly they exchange their money. But there's another principle that quietly shapes wealth. Scarcity. If almost anyone can do what you do, you're competing with countless others offering the same thing. Competition grows. Prices fall. Replacing you becomes easy. But when you develop knowledge, skills, judgment, or creativity that few people possess, something changes. You become harder to replace. And the harder you are to replace, the more valuable your contribution often becomes. Decades ago, Niccolo Machiavelli observed that influence rarely belongs to the person who is merely admired. It belongs to the person whose presence becomes difficult to ignore and whose absence creates consequences. The same principle applies in business and in wealth. People are not rewarded simply because they work. They are rewarded because they solve problems that others cannot easily solve. Look around the world. The surgeon trusted with a complex operation. The entrepreneur who creates a product millions find useful. The engineer who prevents an entire system from collapsing. The writer whose ideas continue shaping minds decades after they were written. Different professions, different lives, the same principle. Each created value that extended far beyond their time alone. Yet many people spend years chasing something entirely different. They chase appearances. They want to look successful before they've become valuable. They buy symbols of wealth before they've built the foundation that creates it. But appearances rarely produce lasting prosperity. Real value does. When you become genuinely useful, when your skills solve meaningful problems, when your judgment becomes something people seek instead of overlook, opportunities begin to appear that never existed before. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because you've become someone capable of creating value that others recognize. The world doesn't pay you for how exhausted you are. It pays you for how difficult you are to replace. And if becoming valuable is the real path toward wealth, why do so many people spend their lives chasing appearances instead of substance? That answer has nothing to do with economics. It has everything to do with human psychology. Chapter 4. The invisible habits that keep people poor. Poverty rarely begins in a bank account. It often begins in a pattern of thinking. Long before money becomes a problem, our decisions quietly shape the direction of our lives. Most of those decisions don't feel important in the moment. They're small, repeated, almost invisible. But over the years, they become habits, and habits become outcomes. The first habit is choosing comfort over growth. The human mind is naturally drawn toward what feels familiar. We avoid discomfort whenever possible. We postpone difficult conversations. We delay learning new skills. We tell ourselves, we'll start tomorrow, next week, or next year. Comfort feels safe, but growth rarely happens inside comfort. Every meaningful skill demands frustration before confidence. Every worthwhile opportunity requires uncertainty before reward. The people who continue growing aren't fearless. They've simply learned that temporary discomfort is often the price of long-term freedom. The second habit is thinking only about today's income instead of tomorrow's value. Most people ask themselves one question: how can I earn more this month? It's a practical question, but there is another question that quietly changes lives. What can I build today that will continue creating value years from now? That question shifts your attention away from surviving the next paycheck and toward creating something that lasts, whether it's a business, a skill, a product, a reputation, or an investment. Lasting wealth is often built by thinking beyond the present moment. The third habit is consuming more than creating. Never before in history has so much information been available with so little effort. Every day, we can watch another video, read another article, listen to another podcast, and convince ourselves we're making progress. Learning is valuable, but knowledge that is never applied becomes entertainment. The people who move forward eventually stop asking, what else can I learn? They begin asking, what can I create with what I already know? Creation changes your life. Consumption alone rarely does. The fourth habit is seeking approval instead of building substance. Many people spend money they haven't earned to impress people who aren't paying attention. They avoid opportunities because they fear criticism. They make decisions based on appearances instead of long-term results. Machiavelli understood that influence was never built on popularity alone. It was built on strength, usefulness, and the ability to endure when opinions changed. The same principle applies to wealth. Looking successful is easy. Becoming genuinely valuable takes years. But only one of those paths creates something that lasts. So ask yourself one question. If nobody could see your life for the next 5 years, no social media, no compliments, no applause, no recognition, would you still make the same decisions you're making today? If the answer is no, perhaps you've been building an image instead of building a future. Understanding these habits is important, but understanding them isn't enough. At some point, Every person reaches a moment where knowledge must become action. Because in the end, your future won't be shaped by what you know. It will be shaped by what you repeatedly choose to do. Chapter 5. The brutal truth about wealth. At the beginning of this video, we asked a simple question. Why does money seem to chase some people while always staying just out of reach for others? By now, the answer should be clearer. It was never about chasing money. It was about understanding the principles that money responds to. Hard work matters. Without discipline, very little is built. But effort alone has limits. There are only so many hours in a day. Leverage changes that. Value changes that. Ownership changes that. The ability to solve meaningful problems changes that. And perhaps, most importantly, the habits you practice every day quietly shape the opportunities you'll have tomorrow. Money was never simply a reward for being busy. It has often been the consequence of creating something that other people genuinely value. That doesn't mean the journey is easy. It doesn't mean life is always fair. People begin from different circumstances. Unexpected setbacks happen. Luck can open doors, and bad luck can close them. But across history, one pattern continues to appear. The people who consistently build value, strengthen their skills, think long-term, and position themselves wisely tend to create more opportunities than those who simply wait for opportunity to arrive. Machiavelli understood that those who shape events often hold more influence than those who merely react to them. The same principle applies beyond politics. Some people spend their lives reacting to circumstances. Others spend their lives building capabilities. They invest in their judgment. They develop rare skills. They create systems. They earn trust. And over time, those choices begin to compound in ways that are almost invisible until one day the results become impossible to ignore. Tomorrow morning, the world will not suddenly become different. The opportunities around you may look exactly the same. But if you now see them through a different lens, you may begin making different decisions. And different decisions, repeated consistently over time, have a way of creating different lives. The world rarely rewards the person who works the hardest. It more often rewards the person who creates the greatest value. The knowledge is now yours. What you build with it is entirely up to you. The knowledge is here. The choice is yours. Until next time, keep building your sovereignty.